So for the last two chapters, we're going to be looking at the immune system. And as you can see from this little cartoon here, there's a lot of interactions that are going to be going on when we look at this, and we can look at it in terms of what are known as non-specific defenses and specific defenses over here. And this is sort of an artificial way that we use to distinguish between two sides of the immune system. And so many textbooks out there will break things down into looking at innate defenses and specific defenses over here. But when we look at this, what we do see is there are a lot of interactions between the different elements here, and a lot of the stuff that is non-specific, that is built in, is going to be boosted in its effectiveness by the specific defenses. And so one of the more complicated parts of this unit is to look at these interactions and to see how both sides of your immune system are going to be interacting with each other to result in these clearing of the pathogens that are out there. So this is a figure that I have got from a different textbook because it does a nice summary to show you this idea of your host defenses. And when we look at a healthy functioning immune system, it's going to be doing surveillance of the body, constantly looking for the invasion and infection that's going on by pathogens, but also your immune system is going to be responsible for recognizing the foreign material and also getting rid of those foreign material that could include the cells or a virus or even the products of those kinds of things when we look at different kinds of toxins that can be secreted out there. And we sort of artificially break this down into two chapters. Chapter 17 is going to look at your built-in non-specific host defenses, and Chapter 18 is going to look at your acquired or specific defenses that are out there. And if we look at this sort of stuff that's going on this side of the diagram, what we're looking at is some defenses that are built in from before you're even born, because remember that idea of torch infections that can cross the placenta and get to the growing fetus out there. You need to have stuff that is built in before you're even born, and so that's why we call it innate. And it's non-specific because it's going to work against a whole battery of different kinds of things that are trying to get into your body to cause those infections there. And so if we look at this first line of defense here, and again, this is sort of an artificial designation that people have come up with to try and simplify it in textbooks. The first line of defense is basically the barriers that are going to block the invasion that can occur at your portals of entry. So it doesn't really involve specific stuff that we see over here in the acquired immunities that we'll be looking at in the next chapter, but it's more general in its activity. And it could be things like physical and chemical barriers, and also cells that are built in. And so we'll take a look at all those different kinds of things that are out there, but also we'll see how those fit in with your second line of defense, which is sort of the underlying systems that are built into you that are going to result in destruction of the pathogen or toxins or products of the pathogen being there, but also things like inflammation and fever. So we want to take a look at their role in this whole process that is out there. So a lot of different little interactions that are going on when we look at all these cells, but we will end up looking in Chapter 18 at your specific or acquired immune defenses. And this is what gives you your long-term immunity that is going to be specific to the particular kind of pathogen. And this is the basis behind a lot of vaccinations that we'll also take a look at with Chapter 18. And so when we look at this, the thing to remember about that is not only is it specific, but you also keep memory, and we'll see that more and more as we take a look at what's going on with the material from Chapter 18 there. One thing to keep in mind when we're looking at all of this stuff is and it sort of goes back to that idea of the median infectious dose and lethal dose, that we only look at what produces the ID50 or the LD50, because there is a lot of genetic variations in the hosts that are out there. Some people can be unaffected by an infectious disease that can result in a lethal condition in other hosts that are out there. So when we look at this, do keep in mind that we're looking at a population of organisms that are out there, and some of these pathogens are actually very, very specific in terms of things like viruses that can only get into certain kinds of tissues. So if you have a mutation on that receptor, you are going to be resistant to that virus right off the bat. The other thing is there are people out there that have mutations that have occurred that actually are going to block their immune system. So maybe it blocks the production of this, maybe it blocks the production of phagocytic cells, or a whole bunch of B and T cells that are out there. Well, if you don't have those cells, you are going to be more susceptible to infection. And this is where we might have seen things about the bubble boy that was out there, where NASA created a suit that actually filtered this kid's air because he did not have a built-in immune system to fight off infections. But also you can see things like patients that come in with severe burns. They're going to have some problems with their first line of defense over here, and so that's why we have this second and third line of defense, because a lot of pathogens can work their way through these barriers and get access to various tissues in your body that, remember, you're looking at yourself as a petri dish at this point. All right, so we'll take a look at this first line of defense and some of the things that are going on here. And you can see in this figure, it gives you sort of an overview with these three different kinds of barriers that we can find at the surface of your body. The physical barriers that are out there, and also things like chemicals, and we work our way in through to get to the cells here. And so we'll look at all these different kinds of examples, and you can see there is a lot of material associated with this chapter. So you do have to spend some time learning some of the terms that are associated with this if you haven't learned it in your previous courses. So we'll start out looking at this idea of physical defenses, and think about it. You've got some armor that is built into you from before you're born out there. And we can look at your skin that is out there. You've got various layers to your skin there. That epidermal layer right here, these are epithelial cells that are dead, basically. They are filled up full of keratin, which helps to make them waterproof, and they're compacted together very tightly there. And held together by a variety of different junctions between the cells. And so if you think about that, this thick, tough layer is going to be impervious to a lot of pathogens being able to get through. So this literally is your armor there that we can use. And also remember, if you have this armor and something does stick to it, you are constantly shedding these cells throughout the day. And so the pathogens that do have the ability to stick are going to be falling off there. We've got hair follicles out there, a great way for things to get through that epidermal layer, but we do actually extrude these things, so occasionally you will lose your hair. Some of us lose more than others that are out there. Built in to this, you've also got a variety of different things like your sweat glands over here that are going to be secreting various chemicals onto the surface of your body, from sweat that is nice and salty liquids to things like mucous membranes that are out there that we find in your eye, your respiratory tract, your digestive tract, and your urinary tract, those mucous membranes that we saw in the previous chapter that are a nice little portal of entry. Well, we are secreting this mucus layer there that is going to provide that protection without having to have those keratinized cells there. And it is going to helpfully block the entry and attachment of a lot of pathogens that are out there, specifically things like the bacteria cells. When we look at this, you can also think about other elements of these mucous membranes. If you look in your respiratory tract, you have little cilia, you have nose hairs right off the bat there, but also as you work your way down into the respiratory tract, you've got these mucous membranes, and you've got little cilia on the epithelial cells there, and those cilia are going to look kind of like these little hair follicles, but those cilia are actually going to have this coordinated beating of the movement there that is going to take the particles that are trapped in the mucus and basically push them up your windpipe until they hit the back of your throat. And so you wake up in the morning and you've got that big old loogie sitting back there, and you can swallow it, and that would actually cause those particles to get into your digestive tract, but you can also spit it out to get rid of it. So a lot of different little things are going on when we look at these physical barriers that are out there. We can look at some of the mechanical defenses that are built into you. And these are things that are going to physically remove pathogens from your body. And so again, some of the stuff I talked about, you're shedding those epithelial cells. We've got that mucus layer in your respiratory tree that you're constantly pushing those things up. Your hair that is out there, and tears that are washing off your eyes right there. And remember, when you look at this idea of tears, those are going to drain down into your nose. When you cry, you get that runny nose because those things that are landing on your eyeballs are getting washed off by your eyelid, and they're ending up over here, and they work their way down into your nose there. We can also look at not only tears to clean things off, but elimination of various waste products and secretions is literally going to cleanse the pipe. And so it's one of those things that you can see out there where people talk on about how actually after you have sex, one of the things that is useful is to actually go and urinate and clean the pipes and get rid of anything that might have gotten pushed up there. So a lot of different things when we're looking at these physical and mechanical defenses that are built into us from before we're born, things that are developing as we're going through fetal growth there. One of the other things that is getting more and more attention here is the actual microbes that you have on and inside of your body. And here we can see a figure from the Human Microbiome Project, and they are actually taking samples of different locations on the body there, going in with swabs and collecting the bacteria, and then sequencing all of the DNA that is collected there and looking at the ribosomal RNA to see or classify the different groups of microbes that we can find in these different locations on your body here. And you can see they've sampled a whole bunch of different ones, and the color in these pie charts represent the number of, or the percentage of population of different families of bacteria that are out there. And you can see that there is some similarities in certain locations, but also some distinct differences when you look at other locations in your body there. So really kind of an interesting thing to look at, the idea that we don't exist by ourselves. We do have things growing on and inside of us, and some of those things are actually going to be very useful for you because these microbes have adapted to living on and inside of us, and they are actually antagonistic to other microbes. So if you think about the E. coli that is sitting in your intestines, they are more adapted to growing there, so they can outcompete other organisms that are out there and change the nutrients that are there or alter the pH, but also they've got squatters' rights. They are effectively living in that location, and that could potentially block something else from being able to get into you. So really kind of an interesting thing to think about, these resident biota. And again, go back to that idea of taking broad spectrum antibiotics. That can clear these things and lead to a secondary or super infection that is out there. We can also look at various chemical defenses that are built into this armor layer there. And you can see a variety of different examples here from your sebaceous glands that are secreting sebum there, that oil of Olay for your skin right there to help keep your skin pliable so it doesn't break easily. Say you ran into a desk. If your skin was like paper, it would crack. We've got different kinds of secretions going on in these layers here that are going to make it more acidic. So if you don't have the ability to survive the acid conditions, we also release lysozyme, which is an enzyme that is specifically made to break down peptidoglycan. You work your way into your stomach, you've got a really acidic environment there, and that's going to result in killing off a lot of these things. So a lot of different kinds of stuff that we can see with these different chemicals that are going to be found in your bodily fluids. And one thing I want to point out is these two little guys here, lactoferrin and transferrin. We'll see in the next video that they're actually going to play a role in taking a rate-limiting chemical, iron, that is in your body and that is necessary for bacteria to grow. And if we can prevent them from getting the iron, they're actually going to be inhibited from being able to grow.